In the future, a tiny drone follows every citizen in the city to watch them 24/7, even if they're just sleeping. This is known as the omniscient system, and it promotes a life without fear. Only 4 homicides have been recorded in 5 years, which proves their world is safer now. One morning when Nina goes to work, a big screen announces an employee has been caught stealing. People don't look worried and even find it amusing that someone would even try. Nina works as a programmer in the drone company, and her boss Ricardo is impressed by her work since it's helped prevent a lot of crime. However, he also reminds her to integrate herself with her coworkers because teamwork is essential. After the meeting is over, Nina calls her dad, but he won't pick up, so she leaves a voicemail. As hours pass, Nina is surprised that her dad doesn't message her back. After work, Nina goes straight home and is shocked to find her father Ignacio dead in a puddle of his own blood with a hole in his back. As she panics, she looks for her brother, but he isn't around. Nina then calls the emergency line, and the operator is confused because no drones have reported the crime. Moments later, both the police and Nina's brother Daniel arrive. The cops investigate the crime scene and interrogate the siblings, wondering if Ignacio self-deleted. Nina takes offense to the question, pointing out someone obviously shot Daniel on the back. The detective explains he must follow old protocol because the city's investigative structure was shut down over 15 years ago, since they depend on the drones nowadays. In fact, he wants the siblings to keep the incident secret because they don't want people to lose trust in the system. The mayor's PA Judite shows up too and gives her a card in case Nina needs anything, promising to find the truth behind the case. That night, the siblings can't sleep and keep wondering why the criminal's drone didn't raise the alarm. The next day, Nina goes to work and notices the detective is around. Then she meets with Carolina, one of the 4 founders who created Omniscient. Nina asks her to access the footage of Ignacio's drone, but Carolina refuses, saying it's a violation of privacy. Furious, Nina breaks a statue outside the office and the drone immediately puts her on the screen for destruction of public property. Minutes later, Nina is at court, which is pretty much empty. The clerk tells her she must pay a fine of $12,000 in a week or she'll be sent to jail, which is a huge problem because she doesn't have that much money. Later at the funeral, Nina and Daniel discover that Ignacio's body wasn't sent as promised. They make a call and an employee just tells them that the autopsy isn't over yet. Getting desperate, Nina goes to Judite for help, and Judite takes her to a station where the drones stay behind. The area outside the city doesn't follow the same laws, so they can talk without being recorded. Judite admits the system isn't perfect, and Nina concludes she must break into the main computer to discover the truth, which will require lots of planning to bypass security. Her first step is getting a fingerprint from one of the creators. When she goes home, she finally allows herself to have a breakdown. Then she starts modifying her clothes for her plan. The next day during a meeting, Nina tries her best to stay calm so the drone won't notice agitation in her vitals. She takes a pen from her boss and puts it in her pocket, which has been covered with a special material that the drones can't scan through. Nina hit a scanner there that is now copying her boss's fingerprint. Next, she knocks over the pencil holder pretending it was an accident and puts back the pen in place without having committed any crime. Sometime later, Nina and the other programmers watch the latest drone prototype being built. She learns that 40 Teslas of magnetic density can cause a drone to stop working, which is a lot. When that actually happens, it only takes 4 minutes for the drone to be replaced. If a replacement drone comes by and can't find its owner, then it will send a message to all the drones in the area to start a search. A coworker shares a story about a relative accidentally breaking a drone when a hairdryer exploded. Another coworker has heard about a drone that stopped working because the owner stood in a freezer for too long. After lunch, Nina joins another meeting that teaches her how the security circuit boards of the main computer work. They're regularly taken out for maintenance and can identify real and fake drone data. A few days later, when she is finally alone, Nina uses the 3D printer at the office to print the stolen fingerprint. She also downloads the schematics of the building from a computer. During lunch break, she runs upstairs to the roof and moves too close to the generator, causing enough electromagnetic disturbance to bring down her drone. Another drone is already leaving the station to find her, so she has 4 minutes to act. Nina hurries downstairs and carefully sneaks around to avoid the employees' drones, who are already searching for her because her new drone couldn't find her. Once the hallway is empty, she uses the printed fingerprint and enters the restricted area, searching the drawers until she finds the circuit board. However, she isn't brave enough to take it and leaves the room without it. Ricardo notices she's distracted but assumes it's the grief, so he gives her the day off. At home, Nina searches Ignacio's room and finds a notebook with tons of money transactions. Then she tries to access his bank account, but it's already been frozen by a court order. In the evening, Nina has dinner with Judite and shows her the notebook, explaining her dad had been broke, so she needs to understand what those notes mean. Judite agrees to help and asks her not to talk to anyone about this. The next day, Judite visits Nina to bring her the information. Ignacio had been sending money to a guy named Hota, who works at a cafe. Nina goes there, and while she waits at a table, she checks her dad's email and finds messages from this Hota saying he knew what Ignacio did and that he deserved to die for it. When Hota finally leaves the cafe, Nina follows him, but Hota notices and confronts her. Nina accuses him of killing her dad and Hota looks genuinely surprised to learn Ignacio is dead. Meanwhile, Daniel crosses the station to drop the drone and leave the city. In a shady neighborhood, he meets Jira, a guy that knows how to get back into the city without a drone following you. However, Jira and one of his henchmen punch Daniel, thinking he is an undercover cop. Daniel explains what happened to his dad and promises he can repay them with Nina's knowledge. However, when he calls her, she doesn't pick up because she's at Hota's home. While Jira threatens to kill Daniel if he doesn't get him what he needs, Nina gets the full story from Hota and his mom. Back in the day, Ignacio worked as a security guard at a bank with Hota's father. One day there was a shootout and Ignacio hid, leaving Hota's dad alone to die. Back then Hota was young and furious, which is why he sent those emails. But Ignacio felt guilty and started sending them money to help. After Nina leaves Hota's home, she finally takes Daniel's call, who sends her an address to meet. She crosses the station and makes it to Jira's hideout, where she finds the thugs hitting Daniel to force her to cooperate. The gang has an armored car and Nina must use a malware to open it for them. Nina works fast and opens the doors in seconds. The gang celebrates accessing the money, but Nina has also pulled a trick to trigger the truck's alarm. The siblings and Jira's group immediately run away and Daniel uses the chance to push the thugs off, giving him and Nina an opening to leave them behind. While the siblings return to the city, Ricardo leaves it and finds the car that keeps in the shady neighborhood. He looks around for a hobo and after putting on some gloves, he starts beating up the guy until he kills him. Then he gets back in his car and marks the day on a calendar, implying he does this once a week. The next day, Nina goes through the same plan again and this time, she manages to steal the circuit board, covering it with a special material so the drone can't scan it. Feeling daring and brave, she then goes to visit her co-worker Vinicius and kisses him, finally getting to the dirty part after weeks of ignoring his flirting. Sometime later, Nina and her best friend Olivia have fun at the karaoke. However, Nina leaves early so she can start working on secretly modifying the circuit at home. Olivia ends up at a bakery and flirts with a guy that she brings home. They try to get dirty, but the guy feels uncomfortable by the fact the drone is watching because he's a tourist from outside the city. Olivia tries to explain it's normal, but the guy decides to leave. The next day at the office, the team tests the drone's resistance. It's improved to a 12%, but they can still be damaged by high heat. Then Nina presents her project. She wants to improve the drone's spatial awareness to avoid bumping into one another. She runs a simulation that puts the drones against strong turbines and they come out of the wind successfully. However, when the wind gets stronger, they still fail. Nina's programming improved their communication but made them slower. After the meeting, Nina is feeling down so Olivia shares her own code for inspiration. Desperate to bring down the competition, Nina deletes a line from her code, only to bring it back because she feels guilty. Sometime later Nina and her team are taken to the only prison in the city, which only has 73 prisoners. Each programmer must interview a prisoner and delineate their psychological profile. A woman tells the story of how she killed her husband, who emotionally abused her. He only got a few months in jail but she got years. When her sentence is over, she plans to leave the city because she would rather be free that's safe under the drones. Another prisoner doesn't like Nina's questions and points out having principles is a privilege. Some people are just desperate to survive. In the meantime, Daniel is trying to get Ignacio's death certificate but the computer keeps telling him there's nothing and the employee won't help him. After many hours of waiting, he finally gets the certificate and is shocked to see his father's death is classified as natural causes. He rushes to bring the certificate to Nina then goes to work, but his shift has already been given to another employee. Furious, Nina takes the certificate to Jadite, who checks the system and notices the doctor that signed the paper doesn't exist. Jadite explains all the investigative channels she tried to open were blocked so she needs Nina to stay calm and be her eyes. Once again getting desperate for that promotion to access the main computer, Nina goes home and deletes the line from Olivia's code. Meanwhile, Olivia is trying to get naughty with a coworker but can't stop thinking about the tourists that dislike the drones. She tells her lover that she would like recording their passion, but the guy gets offended and leaves, not picking on the irony. The next day Olivia presents her idea, which consists of giving the drones needles with sedatives to stop criminals. She's brought a fake knife and Carolina volunteers to do a pretend fight. The women start arguing and Olivia stabs Carolina with the fake knife a couple of times. At first the drone doesn't react but eventually it injects Carolina instead of Olivia, causing her to fail her presentation. Later at home, Nina feels guilty and pushes the things off her desk in frustration. The drone continues to record her and Nina notices it's avoiding her lamp. She picks it up and discovers that the light blinds the drone, so it moves away from it. The next day, Olivia leaves the city and meets with the tourist to finally do the naughty. While the guy is in the bathroom, she secretly puts up her phone to record the whole thing. When she goes home, she watches the video on the big TV and gets dirty with her hand. Downtown, Daniel secretly meets with a journalist. Meanwhile, Nina gets the job and immediately calls Jadite so they can decide on the next step. Jadite brings her a very strong light for her project and admires Nina's work on the circuit board, calling it our Pandora's box. After Jadite leaves, Nina memorizes the positions of the pieces. Then she blindfolds herself, turns on the light to blind the drone, and creates a dummy circuit board using just touch and memory. The board is covered in material that the drone can't scan. The following day, Nina is called to Ricardo's office because the story of Inaccio's murder has been published, thanks to Daniel. Nina must solve this quickly or she'll lose her job. Later at home, Nina asks Daniel to deny the story, but he refuses. To avoid getting caught by the drone, Nina uses an old game as a metaphor to explain she's tackling the case from the inside, which Daniel agrees to. Soon a bunch of reporters are outside Daniel's house, so he has to come out and tell them he lied. Sometime later, Nina keeps trying to contact Olivia but she won't answer. When she goes to work, she learns that the law computer and the main computer are kept separate because the main computer speaks a different language and the law computer translates human language for it. Later she meets with Judite and explains her dummy circuit won't work because she doesn't know the computer's language. She gives Judite some bugs and asks her to put them on the law computer so they can learn this strange language. As days pass, Nina and Vinicius go on dates and keep getting naughty. Nina often calls Daniel to check on him and it's revealed he's living in the sandwich van he works at. One night, Vinicius shares that his father is in jail and Nina realizes it's the guy she interviewed. However, Vinicius doesn't want to know what his father had to say. On the day the politicians are having an event at the company, Nina explains to Judite how to install the bugs. The bosses take the group to the computer room to install an important law update, and while everyone is distracted by the speech, Judite quickly puts the bug under the computer's keyboard. Nina walks through many hallways and even into the bathroom, where she finally picks up the bug signal on her phone. She downloads the information without issues, but Judite is taken away for a picture and fails to retrieve the bug after the download is done. The computer is put away with the bug on it. After the meeting, Nina meets with Judite, who panics because her fingerprints are on the bug. Nina tells her not to go back now because it'll be suspicious and points out that the computer is never accessed unless it's a special occasion, so the chances of being found out are minimal. In the evening, Vinicius takes Nina to a date on a meditation class, but Nina can't concentrate because everyone is making weird noises. Then the teacher offers a special machine to confront the inner demons. Vinicius goes first and sees his childhood, coming out from it rather content with the experience. When it's Nina's turn, she sees herself at home with the art she broke and her dad. She tries following him, but every time she opens the door she returns to the same room in a loop. Eventually she finds Inacio dead, soon followed by the bodies of Olivia, Judite, and Daniel. She loses herself in the vision and can't hear the teacher, who has to disconnect the machine to make her snap out of it. The experience gets her in touch with her guilt and later she calls Judite, taking responsibility for the bug and promising to solve the issue. Nina then starts doing lots of research on the computer and gets an idea. She buys a drill and begins hanging tons of empty picture frames all over her house, calling it a hobby. The drone records this and accepts it as a regular pattern of behavior. A few days later Vinicius comes to see her, noticing all the frames. He also announces he's gotten an important job in Hong Kong. Nina congratulates him. Instead of being sad he'll be away for 2 years, which disappoints Vinicius. Before he leaves, he mentions that there's been some unusual data movement at work. The next day, Nina goes to the computer room and takes out her drill and picture frames. When she starts drilling into the computer, the drone accepts it as Nina's hobby. Then she puts a small tool through the resulting hole and removes the bug. Before leaving, she makes sure to cover the hole. On her way out, she bumps into Vinicius, who gives her a photo for the frames. Afterward he goes to the computer room to investigate the unusual data movement. He notices the sawdust on the computer and when he takes a closer look, he discovers the hole and immediately remembers all the drilling Nina had been doing at her home. Meanwhile Nina gives the bug back to Judite, regaining her trust. A flashback then shows that Nina has been solving puzzles since she was a kid. Whenever her dad came home after a day of hard work with the drones, he would tell her stories about astronauts and outer space. In the present, Nina continues to search Inacio's room and takes his old uniform. On her way out she finds Daniel, who informs her they've finally released their dad's body and they can have a proper funeral now. She apologizes because she won't be able to help since today is her only chance to install the dummy circuit, which has been updated with the new language. At work, Vinicius notices that Nina is behaving strangely. He tries asking her what's going on, but she dodges his questions. Vinicius lets her go by saying he'll see her later at the funeral. After she's gone, he considers looking through her bag, but the drone will see it as a crime so he stops. At the same time, Nina goes to the basement and starts drilling the vent lid to open it, which the drone again sees as her hobby. Then she drops a bunch of cockroaches into the vents as part of her plan. Moments later Vinicius decides to write a report about Nina's behavior and notices the 2 replacements that were sent to the same place, so he mentions she's been on the roof with no surveillance. However, he's unsure if handing it in or not. In the end he gets too nervous and decides not to. Soon the cockroach problem is noticed and the maintenance team is called to solve it. Nina gets ready for her plan and when a manager asks her about today's project, Nina uses the excuse of the funeral to leave without issues. At the funeral, Daniel feels lonely without Nina and Olivia's support isn't enough. He calls Nina and tells her to join him instead of doing something stupid that could get her in trouble, but she refuses. After putting on her father's old uniform, Nina hides the dummy circuit in a pocket and mingles with the maintenance team. The team leader uses her eye on the scan to open the lock and everyone gets helmets before entering the computer room, which is usually sealed with no air. They quickly find the roaches and take them away, but Nina hides behind a column to stay inside. Then she walks toward the vents until her drone is sucked in. Now she can freely access the computer and puts the dummy circuit inside it right before the drone comes out again. Nina admires the sky-like ceiling before leaving, only to find Vinicius locking the entrance. He refuses to open until he hears an explanation, so Nina tells him everything. Vinicius now thinks she's been using him to get here, and when she says she truly loves him, he doesn't believe her. Since he refuses to open the door, Nina decides to rip open her suit and starts choking, so Vinicius has no choice but to open or he'd charge with her death. Nina still passes out and has visions of her dad guiding her through it. Eventually Nina wakes up at the company's infirmary. She immediately leaves and grabs her bag, confirming that she has access to all the footage and database through her phone. At the funeral, Daniel suffers being alone in this hard moment. Thankfully Nina soon arrives and they say the final goodbye together. Later at home the siblings watch the footage, but unfortunately their dad's drone didn't record the killer. Ignacio is shot off screen and his drone concentrates on the body. Daniel is ready to give up, but Nina keeps rewatching the clip over and over for clues and finds the reflection of the killer on the TV. Nina immediately uses the main computer's database to search for the killer's face and learns his name is Davi Ferreira, who is currently walking around and taking secret pictures of people. The siblings don't find much footage of Davi, meaning he's from outside the city. He came once to attend an auction and he bought an old-style camera. Thanks to Davi giving his address to the auction people, the siblings now know where to find him. Moments later, the duo shows up at Davi's house pretending to be photography students interested in old equipment. Davi lets them in and shows them his collection of cameras, only to suddenly pull out a gun and demand an explanation. They tell him about Ignacio and show Davi the footage, explaining that Nina has programmed her phone to send the video to the press if they get killed. Davi explains he's a hitman and he was hired to kill Ignacio, but he has no idea by whom because he uses encrypted messages. Nina promises she has nothing against him and only wants to know who hired him, convincing him to let her use the computer to decode the messages. While Nina works on recovering the messages, Davi explains the person sent him to collect the money at a specific place, where he found a simple suitcase. To enter the city without a drone, Davi used maps of the underground sewers tunnels. He hid there for hours and waited until nobody was around on the streets in the middle of the night. Then he came out through a manhole 2 blocks away from Nina's house and easily entered the apartment building because people don't use locks or security cameras anymore. Davi hid in a maintenance closet until morning so the siblings would be gone from the apartment, meaning he knew their photography story was fake because he had already seen his faces. Afterward he just had to peek through the door to shoot Ignacio, which was quick and painless. Then he hid in the closet again to wait for nighttime, so he heard Nina's desperate cries and the police coming. In the present, Nina finishes accessing the messages but they're all gone. Davi makes them leave and on their way out, Daniel punches him. At the company, Vinicius overhears Ricardo talking to the nurse, who explains Nina disappeared. One of the employees almost finds the report in his computer, but luckily Vinicius stops him before he could see anything. The siblings soon make it home and Nina notices her access disk is missing. At that moment Ricardo and Carolina arrive to check on her. They announce Ignacio's investigation was closed without issues, meaning the system is fine. Nina snaps and accuses Ricardo and Carolina of being behind Ignacio's murder. An argument ensues and Daniel makes the duo leave to calm his sister down. He points out Ricardo and Carolina didn't do it, otherwise Nina would already be in jail. Back to Vinicius, he throws away Nina's uniform and puts it in the wrong trash can, which is a level 1 infraction. He ignores the warning, choosing to pay the fine instead. Soon Nina arrives to talk to him and Vinicius confirms he's leaving for Hong Kong. He can't stay anymore because he's terrified he'll get arrested for being an accomplice. Nina asks for her disc but Vinicius doesn't have it and freaks out when he realizes it was stolen. He refuses to help Nina recover it because she's already gotten him in enough trouble. As she leaves Vinicius' place, Nina keeps thinking about the whole case and realizes Jadite has been using her all along. Nina rushes to find Jadite at a restaurant, who doesn't hesitate to admit she's always known Nina was a genius, so she killed Ignacio to force Nina hack into the main computer and acquire a copy of the database. Now Jadite can manipulate people with all the private footage. A furious Nina grabs a knife and considers going to jail just for revenge, but Jadite threatens Vinicius so Nina stabs her food instead and leaves. Meanwhile Vinicius visits his father in prison after 15 years. Vinicius says he committed a crime, even if it's just irregular garbage disposal, and this helps them get a conversation going. Moments later Jadite meets with her new programmer, who happens to be Olivia. Soon Jadite gains access to the disk and now she can watch the footage of any drone she chooses. Knowing she's in danger, Nina wants to leave the city, and Daniel decides to go with her. While they're crossing the station, Nina gives her drone the middle finger as a final goodbye. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.